is Marian Black Eagle. I am predominantly Native American. I live in Michigan. I am a nurse and I am a Daya. I do freelance lectures around the country on Islam and spirituality. I have a doctorate in metaphysical theology with a master's in comparative faith. I embraced Islam in 1984 after conducting research to prove it a false religion. I had had some friends say some things about Islam that I found uncomfortable, so I decided to research Islam to prove it was a false religion, to teach them a lesson, and I found the most beautiful thing that I ever saw and something that I very much needed in my life. When I embraced Islam, it took me about a month to become public with the choice that I had made, or the choice really that Allah had made for me, and because of my desire to not be a Muslim, to prove it false. So it took me a while to deal with my wounded pride and then come out publicly. And I went to my best friend and I told him, you know, I'm a Muslim now, and he just looked at me, he was very confused, and he said, well, you're an Indian, how can you be a Muslim? And I had to explain to him the difference between nationality and belief. And it made me realize just how limited we often are in our perspectives on who we are and what we can become. My Muslim friends that had said the things that I found offensive, that began my research when I came out publicly and said Shahada, the very first thing that was said to me was, no, you don't mean that. You don't want to do that. Why would you want to be a Muslim? I mean, it's too hard. A woman's only half a man in Islam, and these were Muslims. So my very first conversation as a Muslim to Muslims was defending Islam to Muslims. And I realized that a lot of people don't even know their own heritage. You know, it was a tag that they were born with, and they really didn't know their head from their elbow about what the faith was. And their misconceptions about the woman's position in Islam was based on a very limited understanding of what Islam really is about. So with each argument that they threw at me, being a rebel, it gave me more incentive to learn more so that I could prove to him that my path was in the right place, so I could tell my friends. I had friends, the mother, she had said, well, it's okay if you become Muslim, but don't go overboard. I mean, after all, this is America. You know, why do you want to wear a thing on your head? And I said, well, this is a country that was based on pursuit of happiness, freedom of religion, where people should have the right to choose what they want. So my wearing hijab, my becoming Muslim, is embodiment of what the philosophies of the founding fathers of America is to begin with. So if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in the American way, then you have to believe in my choice to become a Muslim. Freedom is not just about doing what you want to do. It's also about refraining from what you don't wish to do. It's about, if you wish to cover, you can. Just as a girl feels comfortable wearing shorts, I feel comfortable wearing my hijab. That's true freedom. And I found an intellectual freedom wearing hijab that I never had before I was Muslim. I guess it was the stubbornness in me that the more my friends that were Muslim gave me a hard time about Islam, it gave me the incentive to want to learn more. And the more that I learned, the more I was sure that I was on the right path. And I use a lot of the conversations that I had with them in different lectures that I've done, particularly about hijab, about a woman's status in Islam. Like when they were saying that a woman was only half a man in Islam. But in fact, Islam is the most liberating religion there is for women. You know, it gives us rights that we never had before. So I find it promoted me instead of demeaned me. And in turn, then I would share with them, and I realized that they are an example of everyone else in the world that lives in their own little bubble of conception, and it's important to break bread and share and break the misconceptions. Originally, when I started lecturing, I thought that it would just be to my fellow Americans to break the misconceptions of Islam, but I found there's a lot of people that just carry the tag of Islam and they really don't know what it is. And we have to share with each other and teach each other. So that's how I got started on lecturing. I had been Muslim for about 3.5 years before I met an actually practicing Muslim, and I had moved from California to Oklahoma. And I was walking around in a store and I saw a lady in hijab, so I started following her. And when she looked my way, I'd duck behind the clothes rack. And this went on for about half an hour. And finally, I realized if I didn't say something to her, she's liable to tell the police this crazy American woman's following me around. So I went up to her and I said salams. And she didn't speak English, but her husband did. And while we conversed and exchanged phone numbers, I was able to get a very good look at her and see how she was wearing it. So I went to the fabric store and I bought some cloth, but it was very heavy. I think it was like for a coat. And I said, this can't be right. So then I got another piece of cloth and it was too thin and you could see through it. So I was like, where am I going to find the, I felt like Princess and the Pea or Little Red Riding Hood, this is too soft and this is too hard. So finally I found an actual scarf, and it was the right weight. It was not see-through. It was the right size. It was this beautiful black scarf with great big red tomatoes all over it, which looked really silly, but I was so proud of that tomato scarf. And the first time I visited her, I was in hijab. This was during the time of the Gulf War in Oklahoma, the buckle of the Bible Belt, and I wasn't sure how my work was going to accept my change in my appearance. So the first day that I went in to work, and I sat at a desk to get my assignments because I was doing skilled nursing visits, and I worked for another agency where I was working in different hospitals. Wherever there was a shortage of a nurse, they would call me and I would go in. And I went into the skilled nursing part, and I sat there to get my assignment, and my supervisor came up to me and she leaned real close and she whispered, and she goes, "You can't wear that here." So I leaned back at her and I said, "Yes, I can." And it became an argument that went on for days. And then one of the other supervisors stepped in and said, "Look at her record. She's a good nurse. This is a simple thing. And frankly, if you push it, there's already been issues in court. That's her constitutional right." So they stopped troubling me with it, and I wore it in my job. I find that patients, when they're ill, or they've had surgery, they're in a situation of crisis. They really don't care what you look about. The only thing they care about is, do you care about me? Are you competent? Can you take good care of me? And that's what mattered to them. So with patients, I never really had a problem. If anything, they saw that it was something spiritual, that it was about God, and they felt more secure with me. I had one hospital that I used to do almost 40 hours a week with for close to a year. And when I would go in, the other nurses, they would be happy. "Thank God it's you. We didn't know who we were going to get when we heard we're getting an agency nurse." And they knew me, and they knew that I knew my stuff. But one night, I was sitting at the nurse's station charting, and all of a sudden I felt somebody grab the back of my scarf. And it was someone from administration, for some reason, was there on the night shift. And she goes, "You think you're somebody special?" And I just made a joke out of it about how we're all special, and that was the end of it. So I thought. The next day I got a call from my agency, and they said, "Sorry to tell you this, but administration called at such and such hospital, and they said not to send that kind anymore." And I said, "That kind?" And she goes, "Yes, that's exactly what they said." And they said, "We're sorry. We know you haven't done anything wrong. You have an excellent record. But if they didn't want green-eyed nurses, we'd have to oblige because they're the customer. And frankly, even though it's illegal, reality is this is how it works with agencies." So I was beside myself. I was a single mom, no family support. And I sat on my couch and I was very upset and very scared. How was I going to take care of myself? And I sat there, and on my wall opposite of where I was sitting, I had a plaque. And the plaque says, "Shirley Allow is the best of providers." And I just sat there on the couch and I looked at that plaque and I thought, I lost my job because of my faith, but there's no way I'm going to lose my faith because of my job, because Shirley Allow is the best of providers and he will provide for me. Well, a week later, my agency called me with another hospital. They paid me better money. They never harassed me about my hijab. They were completely respectful. And it just reminds me of, in the verse in the Quran, Allah tells us, "O you who believe, spacious is Allah's earth. Those who persevere and do good works will be rewarded without measure." Because truly, that is my employer. That is who I work for. Not the hospitals, not the agency, but for Allah. And when you have that straight in your heart and in your mind, there is no doubt He will provide. I came from a very dysfunctional family, and I ran away at a young age, so I didn't have a lot of contact with my immediate family. I had one sister who was the free-thinking hippie, and we were close. We had shared a lot of the same sorrows growing up, and we had a very close bond. And when I told her that I'd become Muslim, she laughed it off, and yeah, it's just a phase you're going through. Now you're Miss Fatima, is what she called me. But as time passed and I started changing my life, and there were a lot of struggles. You know, it's not always just instantly you're living the good life. You take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There was a lot of demons I had to fight. But little by little, as I purified my life, instead of her being proud of me, she would become more and more angry because I was no longer doing the things that she did that connected us, and she saw religion as something that is separating us. And one day I sent her a newspaper article that was written about me for a lecture that I did, and in it they had quoted some of the things that I had said, and she just became rabid, and insult after insult after insult, and it just reached the point that unfortunately we stopped speaking. But she did learn that it wasn't a phase. After 30-some years, I don't think it's a phase. It's where I'm at. I love my sister, and I pray someday we can bring the ties back, but I worry about her because she's in a very opposite direction than what I'm striving for. But sometimes it happens that way for converts. You lose a lot, but you have to keep in focus what is really important. On the last day, who's going to be there? It's going to be your soul in front of Allah. And that's what you have to keep your focus on. Many times I've said, Alhamdulillah, I knew Islam before I knew Muslims. Unfortunately, I have met women that have had bad examples through marriage, through different relationships, and they have left Islam. What's really important is you have to secure yourself in your knowledge, and you don't choose your faith like you do an article of clothing that you can change according to where you're going. You have to get your knowledge set. You have to know what the deen is truly about, because Muslims can disappoint you, but Allah never will. Know your Islam versus Muslims. That's the best advice that I could ever give anyone. That way you are secure, because it's between your soul and God, regardless of what the world is doing around you. So know your deen. Well, certainly Islam transformed my life. I was a runaway at 14. And I got caught, went back, I ran away again at 15. I went to court, I became an emancipated minor. I spent time in the street. I spent time with a lot of self-destructive behaviors. Growing up in a dysfunctional family, I was not taught dignity or self-respect. And when I came to Islam and I found such beauty, and I realized that I had a right to be a creature of dignity, that I was born into dignity, not born into sin with the original sin. You're born into dignity, and you have a right to be treated with that kind of respect, and you have a right to live a life of respect. And little by little, as I changed my ways and purified my life, there was a time that I thought that God hated me, and that's why all the things that happened to me happened. Instead, I know that He was preparing me, and He was giving me an armor. As a metaphysician, I know that there's wisdom behind pain. And when I came to Islam, it was like a blind person seeing light for the first time. And it is an enlightenment that you just cannot imagine unless you live a life in darkness. When you see that light, it's something you appreciate so much. And I began the path of purifying my life. And I knew that I had arrived one day when I was getting ready for work, and I looked in the mirror, and I actually saw a person I liked. And I thought, that's not a bad person. And that was huge for me. As a theologian that deals with metaphysics, I talk a lot about the duality of mankind, the tabia, the physical nature, the ego, the nafs, versus the fitra, which is the spiritual side of mankind, and how they work together, but it should be the fitra that drives you and not the tabia. The tabia always asks why. Why is there suffering? Why is there this? Why is there that? Because it's concerned about physical comforts, securities. Whereas the fitra doesn't ask why, but it looks for the wisdom behind the pain. And I was writing a lecture about the audacity and arrogance of mankind when it comes to the ownership of life and the anger of when somebody dies before their time and the whys. And I was trying, it wasn't scheduled for anywhere in particular, it's just something that was on my mind that I was writing. And the time came for me to go on vacation. So I put aside and I went to Oklahoma to visit my son and my grandchildren. And a few days after I got there, I got a call and said, have you seen, my son? And I said, I haven't seen him today. I was planning to go there tonight. And I said, okay. And a little while later, I got another call. And I said, well, his supervisor's at his house, and his car is there, and his bike is there, but he's not picking up. Do you still have a key to his house? And I said, yeah, I have the key. I'll go check on him. I knew he was moving, so I thought maybe he hurt himself or something, lifting a refrigerator. That day was my middle son's 11th birthday, and he was in the swimming pool because it was very hot. So I went and got my middle son out of the swimming pool. I said, we need to go check on your brother. Something's wrong. And we went over to the house, and I found my son's body. He had been dead for a couple days. And a mother's grief is not like anything else. If you lose your spouse, you're a widow. You're a widower. If your child loses parents, you're an orphan. But there isn't even a name for a mother who loses a child, because it's the unthinkable. It's against the order of nature. And this was something that I was just trying to write about. So the grief struck in a very intimate way. And I had quit lecturing for quite a while because I found that I needed to practice what I was about to preach. And that's not easy. It's easy to tell people and inspire people, and you need to do this. But at that time, I felt like I was a hypocrite, because now I had to face what I was trying to tell people, that, just believe in God. And so it took me a while to try to find the wisdom behind the pain. And I still struggle with that. But I think the lessons in loss is realizing truly who is the ownership of life, and that this life is fragile, and it is transient. And this is just a path that we're taking. Noah, they asked him, you lived 1,000 years, mashallah, what is life to you? And he said, it's just a hallway. You walk in one door, you walk through, and you walk out the other door. And that's really what I've learned in this, is that this is a transient step in our path. It's where we are prepared for the ultimate reality of life. And during this time we need to hold on to each other and support each other, protect each other. If you feel that someone needs help, don't hesitate. Go and do it. Do what you can to do good. And I think really that is the lesson of realizing how much we need each other, and we lean on each other for humanity to come together and put an end to all of this. I'm not speaking to you, and I'm not speaking to you, and the wars. It's not getting us anywhere. We need to unite. We need to sit down. We need to break bread, put the human face on a global level, and put an end to all of this hatred that we have, and learn to love each other and make this world the best we can. That's our duty in this life. So I think that's the wisdom behind the pain. As I mentioned the story of Noah, about life as a transient plane, I came to know that personally. A couple years ago, I was sitting on my couch watching a movie, and all of a sudden I heard a helicopter. It was a sound like woo, woo. And I was looking around. I was like, what? There's a helicopter somewhere. And then it went away, and I felt a little dizzy, but I was like, what was that? You know, but I was okay, so I finished watching my movie. Then a few minutes later, I heard this helicopter coming again. And this time it was like it was going to land on top of me, and just very loud, this woo woo sound. And all of a sudden I felt myself leave my body. And I realized I was dying. And I was not in my body, but I was not somewhere else. It was like this in-between plane. And I realized I'm dying right here, right now, on this couch. And I said, Ya Allah, please, no, not like this. My son's sitting in the next room. And all I could think of was how I found my child's body, and my other child was with me when I found him, and that I didn't want this for this child, my youngest. And I just said, Ya Allah, please, not like this. I'm yours. You can take me anytime, but not like this, so that my child finds me. And all of a sudden I was back. And I jumped up, and I ran through the house, and I grabbed my scarf, and I told my son, something's wrong, I'm going to urgent care. And I ran out the door, and he said, Mom, what's wrong? Don't drive. And I ran over to the urgent care. I couldn't talk right. I felt very emotional, and I just kept saying, hook me up, I'm going, hook me up. And then they looked at me like I was crazy, you know, yeah, lady, you're going crazy, all right. So, but they understood, hook me up, and they put the monitors on me, and they ran an EKG. And the doctor came in with a strip, and he said, here's your EKG, you're fine. And I said, no, I'm not, I'm going, right now, here I go. And I remember hearing the alarms go off, and the doctor looking up at the monitor and his face falling, and he was at the foot of the bed. He grabbed my feet and he says, I'm with you. And I flatlined. And then I was back again, and he said, I'm glad you came in. You really are going to ICU. You have a conduction problem. And they had to do an emergency pacemaker. But I've always felt that when that happened, and I asked Allah, not now, not this way, because I asked for my child, and it was a sincere plea for someone else, and not selfish, it's my life, I want to live, that God gave me that mercy to come back. And I came back with a renewed sense of appreciation for every day, because every day my son hugs me. I've watched him go from below me to now he's 6 foot tall. I've had this time that I wouldn't have had if it wasn't for the technology. Alhamdulillah, I'm fine now, but I keep with me that appreciation, the sense of borrowed time, and the realization that this isn't what it's all about. And it's helped me as far as my son that passed away, because I know that this doesn't end. The soul goes on, and he's okay. And when I go on, if I live this life properly, inshallah, I will be okay too.